In the past few months, I've driven more new electric cars than I have petrol or diesel ones. And this trend is going to continue today with what we have with us. It's the Lexus UX300e. Now the UX300e is the first fully battery electric vehicle from Lexus here in India. So today we're going to talk about styling, we're going to talk about features, and obviously we're going to talk about what the Lexus UX is like to drive. Hi, I'm Karan Singh, you are watching autoX, and if you don't want to miss out on more such great automotive content, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's get right into it. So let's start the video by talking about the styling of the Lexus UX. Now, front and center here is the Lexus spindle grille. This is a big grille. It's got lots of sharp elements, so I think it looks really cool, really striking. There's the Lexus badge in the center. Now, of course, this is like a normal Lexus badge, but there are blue elements here, sort of signifying that this is not a normal UX and this is the fully electric one. On either side, you have these really sharp LED headlights. This has the Lexus tick mark, and I think that looks really nice. It makes the UX really stand out, especially at night. Then at the sides and at the bottom, you have this L-shaped element where there's a sort of a vent and these fog lights. I think the front end actually of the UX looks really nice. Now even the bonnet, I'm not sure if you can see this on the video, but even the bonnet has these really sharp creases, really nice bulges. So of course there's no V8 hiding under the hood of the Lexus UX. There's an electric motor there. We'll talk more about that later. But it looks really striking, really powerful and really muscular. I think the front end is very nice. Let's move on to the side of the UX. So now down the side, the really cool design theme of the UX continues. So there's a strong character line. There's actually lots of different strong lines flowing through the body and lots of sharp cuts and creases. Even the rear haunches, they sort of stick out. So even the side profile of the UX is quite cool to look at. You won't really be missed in a crowd. The roofline slopes down. The glass area is small. There's actually a long hood. So the UX actually has a very sporty stance. There is also plastic cladding all around, and on the arches they are sort of squared off, so it looks kind of odd if you look at it at weird angles, but in person they actually don't seem too bad. Now let's move around to the rear. So before we move on to the rear, let me talk about this. So there's a charge port here on this side, and there's also a charge port on the other side. The one on this side is the AC charger, so the slow CCS charger, while the other side is the other fast charger. Now anyways, let's move on to the back. Now here is probably my favorite angle of the Lexus UX. You get this full width LED light bar, and that looks really special at night. You get these really cool, edgy, sharp LED tail lights. They sort of stick out up, and I think they look really cool. There's also a sort of very small trunk opening, so that makes for a fairly high loading lip, but the UX actually has a very sporty stance, so I think it's a fair compromise. But overall, even from the back here, the Lexus UX, it looks really nice. But now, let's move on to the interior and see what that's like. So now we're in the cabin of the Lexus UX, and like the outside stands out, even this cabin really stands out. There's a lot of shapes, textures, a lot of different lines going on here. So let's take it all one by one. So we'll start with this bit. So here you have the gear selector. Now this, like other Lexuses, is not a simple gear selector. You can't just slot it back for drive. You shift it to your right and go back for drive or reverse, and it actually works quite well. It takes about a few days to get used to it, but after that it's very intuitive. Then you have a touchpad here. That's because the 10.3-inch infotainment screen here is not a touchscreen. So you use it via this touchpad. So you have like a palm rest sort of a thing here, and you just swipe and you use the screen with that. It does have haptic feedback to tell you when you've hit a menu item or a selection. Now while this touchpad actually does work well, all the UI, especially for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which this does have, by the way, in wired form, all of those layouts are actually meant for touch surfaces. So it makes getting around menus and figuring out the maps and typing stuff very hard, much harder than a touchscreen. It's actually way more distracting while driving to use the touchpad versus using the touchscreen, because the mouse is a little too sensitive at times and you don't know where you might end up on the screen. So in that regard, it's not a very good system. We've tried the system on the new Lexus NX. That gets a massive touchscreen, so that is way better. A touchscreen would any day be more welcome in this cabin. But that said, this touchpad is okay compromise. Then you also have, quite curiously, you have the media controls here as well. So you have a volume knob here, and you have your media shortcuts here. So that's okay, that's pretty cool. It's nice for the driver to have if you just want to control the volume quickly. You don't need to figure anything about that. You can just do it from here, or of course, do it from the steering wheel as well. But aside from that, the quality of the materials is actually pretty good. You get this really cool like textile style fabric here. It's nice soft touch. There's a nice stitching going on here. It's contrasting color, so it actually looks really nice. Even the material quality all the way on the upper half of the dash is actually very, very good. There's soft touch all the way here. The leather is really, really soft. The armrest, the seats, all the leather is like really, really soft. But lower down, there are some scratchy plastics like the bits here and the bits here. So that's a bit of a miss. Aside from that, you get dedicated climate controls, which is nice to see. These buttons feel good quality. Then you have your ventilated and heated seat controls over here in the bottom section. Again, the buttons feel nice, they're high quality. You also get a heated steering wheel on the Lexus UX. Today is a blazing hot day, so if I was to switch on the heated steering wheel, my hands would probably melt. But it's still a nice feature to have. For example, if you go out in the hills or if it's wintry, it's a nice feature to have. Then let's talk about the steering wheel. So you get a regular Lexus steering wheel. You get these really big fat metal paddles at the back. Now these are of course not for the gears, but these are to control the regen. So you go minus if you want to increase the amounts of regen, plus if you want to reduce the amount of regen. But we'll speak more about that later. Aside from that, you get your media controls here. You also get your buttons for the cruise control, and you get your button for your lane keep assist and the ADAS systems. The Lexus UX also gets a sunroof, but this is a bit like the olden times of sunroofs. So when you open the sunroof, the cloth cover does not retract back on its own. You have to do that manually, which is a bit weird. But anyways, overall, the cabin actually feels quite special. I like these stalks on either side of the instrument cluster. So the one on the left is for the drive mode. So you go up for sport, down for eco, or you can press it in for normal. Then on the right side, you have your traction control button. So you just like a long press and then you can switch off your traction control. So all that is actually very nice. Even the quality of the indicator stalks, I must say, is very nice. They feel nice to use and very robust. So the entire cabin actually feels really, really good. There's obviously a lot of features here. So you get ventilated seats, like I mentioned. There's wireless charging. There's a lot of storage here. So you can open the armrest this way, or if the passenger wants, you can open it that way. That's actually a pretty cool detail. You have two USB-A charging ports here. You also have an aux port in case your phone still has a headphone jack. But aside from that, the cabin is actually a nice place to be. So now let's quickly hop into the back of the Lexus UX before we get to the driving bit. Okay, so now we're in the back seat of the Lexus UX, and as you can probably see, this is not its strong suit. So knee room is at a serious premium here. I'm 5'11". The driver's seat is adjusted to my driving position and my knees are pressed up against the back of the front seat. I also don't have much place for my feet to go under the front seat because the floor is quite high. The floor is high, that also means there's a knees up sitting position. So overall, the seating position of the Lexus UX in the back here is not great. It should be okay for kids, but then what the downside for kids would be that the window line is quite high and they might feel a little closed in, and that feeling is actually there. The sunroof doesn't extend all the way back, and the cabin actually feels very compact from the back of the Lexus UX. A few details here. So you get AC vents in the back. There's no different climate control for the back, but you get AC vents. You get two Type A charging ports. You also get heated seats in the back here. Now, I don't know how much this will be useful in India, but it is still a good feature to have. Again, the leather and stuff like that is still soft here. You do get an armrest with cup holders, so that is nice. But the plastics, even on the upper parts, are scratchy in the back, which they aren't in the front. So that does show you that Lexus is not aiming for this to be a car that you want to be chauffeured in. You want to be driving the Lexus UX. Another miss is the fact that there are no door pockets in the back. There is absolutely no storage aside from these cup holders, and the single seat back pocket that you have, you actually don't have a seat back pocket on this side, which is a bit confusing to me. So actually the rear seat of the Lexus UX is not great. Even the door aperture is actually very small, and the floor being so high makes it a very hard car to climb into and get out of. Again, kids should be okay for shorter journeys and maybe even longer journeys, but adults only for shorter journeys, or if they're not your best friends, you can probably send them in the back here. Okay, so now let's quickly get on and drive the Lexus UX and find out what it's like. Okay, so now we are driving the Lexus UX. Now this is actually a very nice, relaxing car to drive. So the first thing that strikes you is, of course, how silent the entire experience is. Of course, the electric motor barely makes a sound, but even otherwise, overall refinement, the NVH levels, they are fantastic. The road noise is very well contained. The wind noise is also very well contained. You can barely hear the road surface creeping in, and that might not seem like much of a deal, but in an EV where the cabin is actually very silent, all of this makes a big difference in making the entire experience feel a little bit more relaxing. Now, another thing making the experience relaxing is the fact that the Lexus UX is actually quite a laid-back electric vehicle to drive. Now, this has 201 bhp and 300 Nm of torque. 0 to 100 is a claimed 7.5 seconds. So it's not really slow by any standards, but it also won't really take your breath away like some other electric vehicles will. The good thing to note is that the performance doesn't really taper off after you really hit the 100 km/h mark. So if you're at highway speeds, you can still make overtakes fairly quickly, and that is nice to have. Now, the battery is a 54.3 kilowatt-hour battery, and Lexus says that enables a range of about 314 kilometers if you have the smaller 17-inch rims. Now, this car is with the larger 18-inch rims, and we haven't done a full real-world range test yet, but I can tell you, you won't really get near the 300 kilometer mark. The real-world range figures will be more like 240, 250 kilometers. So that's not very good, and that makes the Lexus UX not the ideal choice if you want to do really long-distance trips. But if you are using it for just around town, it should be very, very good. Now, in terms of charging, this can charge at up to 50 kilowatts. So it takes about 53 minutes to go from 0 to 80% on a 50 kilowatt charger. Now, I must tell you that like other Japanese cars, this is not on the CCS2 charging point. This uses the other CHAdeMO connector. There are a lot fewer of those in our country as compared to the CCS and CCS2. You can still use the CCS to slow charge using the AC charger. There's one charging port on either side. One is for the AC charging, which is the CCS, that's commonly found. But the CHAdeMO, the faster charging one, is slightly less common. Now, overall, in terms of driving, the Lexus UX is actually very nice. The steering is nice, it's weighted well. It feels like a quality item in the hand. It really responds well to your inputs as well. There is a bit of body roll on the UX. It is quite a heavy car, and you can feel the weight that's below the belt, especially when you push it hard into corners. But overall, it's a very nice car to drive. The ride quality, that is fantastic. It really dampens out bumps, potholes really, really well. And there are very few thuds that filter into the cabin. So the ride quality might just be the highlight for the Lexus UX. Now, a few other bits I've noticed as I've driven the Lexus UX a little bit more is the fact that the side view mirrors, they are quite small. There is blind spot monitoring on the Lexus UX. Actually, it gets a full suite of ADAS systems. So there's lane keep assist, radar, cruise control, all of that. So that's actually good to have, but these mirrors, they are very small and they make the Lexus UX a little hard to place in very tight traffic. Another thing not really helping that case is the fact that rear visibility is not great. It has that coupe-like roofline, so that means there's a small glass window at the back, and a thick C-pillar means that there is quite a big blind spot, which is where this blind spot monitor actually comes in quite handy. Now, the next thing we should talk about is the regen. So you can control the regen with these paddles here. So if I'm slowing down, I can press the minus and now it's on maximum regen. But even with the regen in its most aggressive setting, you don't really slow down too much. This is not anywhere close to having a one-pedal driving experience. And one more thing that really does confuse me is the fact that the regen resets after you start accelerating. So when I accelerate and then I slow down again, the regen will be at its default setting, and that is not strong regen at all. Of course, when you use the brake pedal, you are using some of regen, and it shows you that with the head-up display. So the head-up display doesn't just show you the speed, it also has a charging, eco and power graph here. So basically when you floor it, you can see that it's gone into the power side of things and you're not really being very economical. When you're being gentle with the car, it shows you that you're in eco and there's a blue line there. And then when you get on the brakes or when you're using the regen, it shows you that you're charging up the battery, which is nice to see. Now, aside from that, you get this power digital instrument cluster here. Now, I'm not a big fan of this because it's not very configurable. So you basically have your speedometer in the center. On the right, you have your gauge for the electric battery. So it's not really a percentage indicator. It's more like a fuel gauge that's been repurposed to be a battery indicator. And on the left side, you have a bit of information. So you have your range, you can show your music data and all that. So that is nice to see. But this isn't nearly as configurable as something like Audi's virtual cockpit, for example. Now, there are driving modes here, so you have sport, normal and eco, but all that really does is really sharpen or dull down the throttle responses. So I've really left it in normal mode for the most part, or eco when I'm really down on range. But aside from that, the sport actually just sharpens up the throttle response. It makes it a little bit more fun to drive, but the Lexus UX is a front wheel drive electric car. So there's 300 Nm of torque going to the front wheels instantly, which means that the traction control is working overtime. The second you floor it from a standstill, the traction control light is on and the power is just cutting off. So you're best using the throttle gradually instead of flooring it like you can do in other EVs. especially from a standstill, the UX really struggles to put down its power. There is also a lot of torque steer, so when you do floor it, the front goes light and there is a bit of torque steer. So it's not really a very engaging car to drive fast, but when you're driving comfortably, when you're driving in a more relaxed manner, the UX is actually fantastic to drive. This Mark Levinson sound system, it's got a 13-speaker Mark Levinson sound system. It is really, really good. Mark Levinson is slowly becoming one of my favorites in the audio category, so that gets a big thumbs up from me. And I like the driving position. I like the relaxed manner in which the UX goes about its ways. It's not pretending to be sporty, and I really like that. So overall, the Lexus UX might not have a lot of range or performance, but it is very, very comfortable, almost serene, a very calming driving experience, and that is great to have in cities where there's a lot of tight traffic and congestion. So in all of that, the Lexus UX actually makes a lot of sense. It might not be a trailblazer on the racetrack, but out here in the city, in the urban jungle, the UX is really fun to drive. Now, Lexus hasn't confirmed that it's bringing the UX300e to India, but it is merely using it to evaluate the feasibility of an all-electric Lexus in our country. So, how does it fare? The Lexus UX300e might not make too much sense on paper. It doesn't really have a real-world range of over 300 kilometers. It doesn't really have that much space inside, especially compared to other premium luxury EVs, nor does it really have all the features, all the gizmos that some of its competition might have. But not all EV buyers are looking for practicality. If you are looking for a luxurious, comfortable and quite stylish way to potter around town without polluting the environment, the Lexus UX300e does fit the bill perfectly. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment below if you liked it. If you didn't like it, do let us know in the comments why you didn't like it, and let us know what you think about the UX300e. And of course, if you do like our content, do subscribe to the autoX YouTube channel.